They passed under the huge cloaked Liberator's form. Martin Cunningham nudged Mr. Power. Of the tribe of Reuben, he said. A tall, black-bearded figure, bent on a stick, stumping round the corner of Elvery's elephant house, showed them a curved hand open on his spine. In all his pristine beauty, Mr. Power said. Mr. Daedalus looked after the stumping figure and said mildly, "The devil break the hasp of your back." Mr. Power, collapsing in laughter, shaded his face from the window as the carriage passed Gray's statue. "We have all been there," Martin Cunningham said broadly. His eyes met Mr. Bloom's eyes. He caressed his beard, adding, "Well, nearly all of us." Mr. Bloom began to speak, with sudden eagerness, to his companions' faces. "That's an awfully good one that's going the rounds about Reuben J. and the Sun." "About the boatman?" Mr. Power asked. "Yes. Isn't it awfully good?" "What is that?" Mr. Daedalus asked. "I didn't hear it." "There was a girl in the case," Mr. Bloom began, "and he determined to send him to the Isle of Man out of harm's way. But when they were both—" "What?" Mr. Daedalus asked. "That confirmed bloody hobble-ahoy, is it?" "Yes," Mr. Bloom said. "They were both on the way to the boat, and he tried to drown." "Drown Barabbas!" Mr. Daedalus cried. "I wish to Christ he did." Mr. Power sent a long laugh down his shaded nostrils. "No," Mr. Bloom said, "the Sun himself." Martin Cunningham thwarted his speech rudely. Reuben J. and the Sun were piking it down the quay next the river, on their way to the Isle of Man boat, and the young chiseler suddenly got loose and over the wall with him into the Liffey. "For God's sake!" Mr. Daedalus exclaimed in fright. "Is he dead?" "Dead?" Martin Cunningham cried. "Not he! A boatman got a pole and fished him out by the slack of the breeches, and he was landed up to the father on the quay. More dead than alive. Half the town was there." "Yes," Mr. Bloom said, "but the funny part is—" "And Reuben J., Martin Cunningham said, "gave the boatman a florin for saving his son's life." A stifled sigh came from under Mr. Power's hand. "Oh, he did," Martin Cunningham affirmed. "Like a hero. A silver florin." "Isn't it awfully good?" Mr. Bloom said eagerly. 1 and 8 pence too much," Mr. Daedalus said dryly. Mr. Power's choked laugh burst quietly in the carriage. "Nelson's pillar. 8 plums a penny. 8 for a penny." "We had better look a little serious," Martin Cunningham said. Mr. Daedalus sighed. "Ah, then, indeed," he said. "Poor little Patty wouldn't grudge us a laugh." Many a good one, he told himself. "The Lord forgive me," Mr. Power said, wiping his wet eyes with his fingers. "Poor Patty. I little thought a week ago when I saw him last, and he was in his usual health, that I'd be driving after him like this. He's gone from us." "As decent a little man as ever wore a hat," Mr. Daedalus said. "He went very suddenly." "Break down," Martin Cunningham said. "Heart." He tapped his chest sadly. "Blazing face. Red hot. Too much John Barleycorn. Cure for a red nose. Drink like the devil till it turns Adalite. A lot of money he spent coloring it." Mr. Power gazed at the passing houses with rueful apprehension. "He had a sudden death, poor fellow," he said. "The best death," Mr. Bloom said. Their wide open eyes looked at him. "No suffering," he said. A moment and all is over, like dying in sleep. No one spoke. Dead side of the street, this. Dull business by day. Land agents, Temperance Hotel, Falconer's Railway Guide, Civil Service College, Gills, Catholic Club, the Industrious Blinds. Why? Some reason. Sun or wind. At night, too. Chummies and slavies. Under the patronage of the late Father Matu. Foundation stone for Parnell. Breakdown. Heart. White horses with white frontlet plumes came round the rotunda corner, galloping. A tiny coffin flashed by. In a hurry to bury. A mourning coach. Unmarried. Black for the married. Piebald for bachelors. Done for a nun. Sad, Martin Cunningham said. Child. A dwarf's face, mauve, and wrinkled like little Rudy's was. Dwarf's body, weak as putty, in a white-lined deal box. Burial-friendly society pays. Penny a week for a sod of turf. Our little beggar baby. Meant nothing. Mistake of nature. If it's healthy, it's from the mother. If not, the man. Better luck next time. Poor little thing, Mr. Dedalus said. It's well out of it. The carriage climbed more slowly the hill of Rutland Square. Rattle his bones. Over the stones. Only a pauper. Nobody owns. In the midst of life, Martin Cunningham said. But the worst of all, Mr. Power said, is the man who takes his own life. Martin Cunningham drew out his watch briskly, coughed and put it back. The greatest disgrace to have in the family, Mr. Power added. Temporary insanity, of course, Martin Cunningham said decisively. We must take a charitable view of it. They say a man who does it is a coward, Mr. Dedalus said. It is not for us to judge, Martin Cunningham said. Mr. Bloom, about to speak, closed his lips again. Martin Cunningham's large eyes, looking away now. Sympathetic human man he is. Intelligent, like Shakespeare's face. Always a good word to say. They have no mercy on that here or infanticide. Refuse Christian burial. They used to drive a stake of wood through his heart in the grave, as if it wasn't broken already. And yet sometimes they repent too late. Found in the riverbed, clutching rushes. He looked at me. And that awful drunkard of a wife of his, setting up house for her time after time and then pawning the furniture on him every Saturday almost, leading him the life of the damned, wear the heart out of a stone that Monday morning start afresh, shoulder to the wheel. Lord, she must have looked a sight that night, Dedalus told me he was in there, drunk about the place and capering with Martin's umbrella. And they call me the jewel of Asia, the geisha. He looked away from me. He knows. Rattle his bones. That afternoon of the inquest. The red-labeled bottle on the table. The room in the hotel, with hunting pictures. Stuffy it was. Sunlight through the slats of the Venetian blinds. The coroner's ears, big and hairy. Boots giving evidence. Thought he was asleep first, then saw yellow streaks on his face. Had slipped down to the foot of the bed, Verdict: overdose. Death by misadventure. The letter: For my son Leopold. No more pain. Wake no more. Nobody owns. The carriage rattled swiftly along Blessington Street. Over the stones. We're going the pace, I said. I think. We're going the pace, I think, Martin Cunningham said. God grant he doesn't upset us on the road, Mr. Power said. I hope not, Martin Cunningham said. That will be a great race tomorrow in Germany. The Gordon Bennett. Yes, by Jove, Mr. Daedalus said. That will be worth seeing. Faith. As they turned into Berkeley, during Berkeley Street, a street organ near the basin sent over and after them a rollicking, rattling song of the halls. Has anybody here seen Kelly? Kelly. Dead March from Saul. He's bad as old Antonio. He left me on my ownio. Pirouette. The Mater Misericordix. Misericordiae. Eccles Street. My house down there. Big place. Ward for incurables there. Very encouraging. Our Lady's Hospice for the Dying. Dead house handy underneath. Where old Mrs. Riordan died. They look terrible, the women. Her feeding cup and rubbing her mouth with the spoon. Then the screen round her bed, and for her to die. Nice young student that was, dressed that bite the bee gave me. Nice young student that was dressed that bite the bee gave me. He's gone over to the lying in hospital, they told me. From one extreme to the other. The carriage galloped round a corner. Stopped. What's wrong now? A divided drove of branded cattle passed the windows, lowing, slouching by on padded hooves, whisking their tails slowly on their clotted, bony croops. Outside them and through ran saddled sheep, bleating their fear. Emigrants, Mr. Power said. Huh, the driver's voice cried, his switch sounding on their flanks. Huh. Out of that. Thursday, of course. Tomorrow is killing day. Springers. Cuffy. Sold them about 27 quid each. For Liverpool, probably. Roast beef for Old England. They buy up all the juicy ones. And then the 5th quarter is lost. All that raw stuff, hide, hair, horns, comes to a big thing in a year. Dead meat trade. Byproducts of the slaughterhouses for tanneries, soap, margarine. Meat trade. Margarine. Wonder if that Dodge works now getting dicky meat off the train at Clonsilla. The carriage moved on through the drove. I can't make out why the corporation doesn't run a tram line from the park gate to the quays, Mr. Bloom said. All those animals could be taken in trucks down to the boats. Instead of blocking up the thoroughfare, Martin Cunningham said. Quite right. They ought to. Yes, Mr. Bloom said. And another thing I often thought is to have municipal funeral trams like they have in Milan, you know. Run the line out to the cemetery gates and have special trams. Hearse and carriage and all. Don't you see what I mean? Oh, that be damned for a story, Mr. Daedalus said. Pullman car and saloon dining room. A poor lookout for Corny, Mr. Power added. Why, Mr. Bloom asked, turning to Mr. Daedalus. Wouldn't it be more decent than galloping two abreast? Well, there's something in that, Mr. Dedalus granted. And Martin Cunningham said, we wouldn't have scenes like that when the hearse capsized around Dunphy's and upset the coffin on the road. That was terrible, Mr. Power shocked face said. Mr. Power shocked face said, and the corpse fell about the road. Terrible. First round Dunphy's, Mr. Dedalus said, nodding. Gordon Bennett Cup, praises be to God. Martin Cunningham said piously, bomb, upset. A coffin bumped out on the road. Burst open. A coffin bumped out onto the road. Burst open. Paddy Dingham shot out and rolling over stiff in the dust in a brown habit too large for him. Red face. Gray now. Mouth fallen open. Oh my God. Asking what's up now. Quite right, close to it. Looks hard open. Then the insides decomposed quickly. Much better to close up all the orifices. Yes, also. With wax. The sphincter loose. Seal up all. Dunphy's, Mr. Power announced as the carriage turned right. Dunphy's corner. Mourning coaches drawn up, drowning their grief. A pants by the wayside. Tip-top position for a pub. Expect we'll pull up here on the way back to drink his health. Pass round the constellation. Elixir of life. But suppose now it did happen. Would he bleed if a nail, say, cut him in his knocking about? He would and he wouldn't, I suppose. Depends on where. The circulation stops. I was thinking about it. Still, some might ooze out of an artery. It would be better to bury them in red. A dark red. In silence they drove along Phibbsborough Road. An empty hearse trotted by, coming from the secretary. Looks relieved. Cross Guns Bridge. The Royal Canal. Water rushed, roaring through the sluices. Sluices? A man stood on his dropping barge between clamps of turf. On the towpath, by the lock, a slack-tethered horse, aboard of the bugaboo. Their eyes watched him. On the slow, weedy waterway, he had floated on his raft coastward over Ireland, drawn by a haulage rope past beds of reeds. Wait a second. I just want to go back a little bit. Dunphy's corner. Morning coaches drawn up. I'll just keep going. Past the reeds. Over slime. Mud-choked bottles. Carrion dogs. Athlone. Mullingar. Moy Valley. I could make a walking tour to see Millie by the canal. Or cycle down. Hire some old crock. Safety. Wren had one the other day at the auction, but a lady's. Developing waterways. James McCann's hobby to roam me o'er the ferry. Cheaper transit. By easy stages. Houseboat. Camping out. Also hearses. To heaven by water. Perhaps I will without writing. Come as a surprise. Lake slip. Clonsilla. Dropping down, lock by lock, to Dublin. With turf from the Midland bogs. Salute. He lifted his brown straw hat. Saluting Paddy Dingham. They drove on. Past Brian Borimhe House. Near it now. I wonder how is our friend Fogarty getting on, Mr. Power said. Better ask Tom Kernan, Mr. Dedalus said. How is that? Martin Cunningham said. Left him weeping, I suppose. Though lost to sight, Mr. Dedalus said. His memory dear. To memory dear. The carriage steered left for Fingless Road. To stop there. It's late and I'm so tired. Long day. Did not get to do this in the morning, even though I woke up at 6 something. Okay.